Shalom, everyone. Welcome back to our ninth part of the Torah series we've been covering. I know it's been a couple days, about a week, but I have a lot of research I like to do before I do these, and Father always gives me the proper time. So today we are going to be looking at the 7th week Shabbat and the Jubilees, or Jubilee, since obviously there was no J until the advent of the Germanic languages, and mainly English, introducing J as the last letter of the alphabet, so Jubilee. But the actual proper Hebrew names of the 7th year Shabbat and Jubilee is the Shemitah year, which that's the 7th year, sabbatical Shabbat year. And in Hebrew, the proper term for the Jubilee is the Yovel. So Yovel, proper Hebrew for Jubilee, and the Shemitah, the 7th Shabbat year. As always, I use proper sacred names and terminology. So I use Father's sacred name. I say Yahshua instead of Jesus, Yahshua HaMashiach instead of Jesus Christ. And then, of course, Yah Elohim instead of what most people hear. I also use the proper Hebraic terms for locations as well as book titles of scripture and locations. So Yerushalayim instead of Jerusalem, Shemoth instead of Exodus, etc. Yadad instead of David. If you have a Bible with the sacred name text or sacred name theology text, which basically, or Hebraic text, then a lot of this will be familiar to you. If you don't have one, then honestly, the one I recommend would be the Hallelujah Scriptures. They don't just do the canonical 66 books of Scripture, 29 Renewed Covenant, New Testament, and 39 First Covenant Old Testament scriptures, but they also have, I believe actually they've just released a complete edition to where they've also done all the extra biblical books. So they've also done the book of Yovel, the book of Jubilees, they've done Yasher, they've done the writings of Enoch, all with proper sacred Hebraic terms, sacred names. And even though I do not agree with this practice, they also offer different types of the sacred name Bible. So you can get some from the Hallelujah Scriptures who has the name of Yah, the full name of Yah, and some has, like, I don't think they do Yahoah because of course they know that's malarkey, Yehovah or Yahuwah, but they do one that is another form, an erroneous form of the sacred name of Yah, and I think it might be Yahweh or something like that. I can't exactly be sure, but I don't agree with that practice, obviously, but they offer the scriptures with those different editions with different versions of the sacred name, I guess, for people that go by different forms. But if you want a really good Hebraic sacred name text for scripture, I highly recommend the Hallelujah Scriptures. Understandably, the books themselves are pretty pricey, their Bibles. I think the complete edition is about $300. But I can totally understand because they actually do it in genuine animal leather. They do it, I mean, like they've got the full edition. They've weighed the full compendium with all of the biblical. So not just what's in most canonical, but also the extra biblical, Yovel, Jubilees, Enoch, the Deuterocanonical, so apocryphal books, all in one, the largest edition. It's a massive book and it's so extensive. It's not just the Hebraic terms and names, but they also have sections where you can actually, it's a linear Bible basically. So you also have like the Paleo-Hebrew translations alongside the English. So you can actually kind of learn Hebrew as you go, which is really cool. So with all that said, let's go ahead and get started today. This is going to be one of the most important videos of Torah Father's had me cover yet, and you're going to see as we go on why that is. Because of everything we've covered, from the Kashrut, the dietary laws, the Moedim, meaning appointed time, the 7 feasts of Father, which is, we remember, is Pesach, Passover, Hachamatzai, Feast of Unleavened Bread, the Reshit Ketur, which is the first fruits, Shavuot, which is the Feast of Weeks, Yom Teruah, Feast of Trumpets, Yom Kippur, Day of Atonement, Sukkot, Feast of Booths, and Yom Shemitah, which is the 8th day, which is a tack on the 8th day celebration that goes right alongside the last feast of the year, which is Sukkot, the Feast of Booths. That All of the videos we did, even looking into like Shaul's writings, the first 3 parts of the series about why Torah was not abolished, why that it and salvation goes hand in hand with one another, looking at those key scriptures like Jeremiah, about how Father would put his Torah into our hearts in the later days of the later covenant, making the argument where if Torah was not meant to still be observed, why would he have to write it into our hearts in the renewed covenant era, as well as Gilliana Revelation, where it says that this is the patience, or this is the perseverance of the Kodashim, the saints, the believers, that they keep, those who observe the commandments or keep the commandments of Yah and keep the faith of Yahshua. So those who believe in Yahshua and also keep the commandments and the mitzvah of Yah. And the mitzvah, the commandments of Yah, is obviously Torah. So of all we've done so far, and even the one on the Shabbat, this is one of the most important, because this particular video today, this message hits right at the heart of one of the things that this world is so deeply corrupted in. And it is the one thing that Father commanded of his people. And we're going to look at today why he commanded this of us. And I will preface it by saying this. There's a reason why all throughout the scriptural narrative, Father tells his people to do something repeatedly. You find this all throughout the First Covenant Old Testament scriptures in the Torah. You also find it all throughout the Renewed Covenant, the New Testament teachings, and the best sort of the Gospels. Yahshua teaches this. His disciples teach this. Shaul taught this. And that is giving to others, giving of your money, giving of your time, giving of your assets to other people, giving to the poor and the needy, the fatherless and the widow. And many of Father's observances, such as we looked at the true stipulation and restrictions for Shabbat day, if you recall, about that Hebrew word malacha, even though malacha refers to a full body of works. When we look at the Shabbat, what work Father expressly forbade was commerce, the exchanging of money, business transactions on the Shabbat, which again we find a perfect example of that in the story of Nehemiah, where he banned the people, and that the whole issue, what they were doing in violating Shabbat, was they were doing business on the Shabbat day. There's a reason why the Father, in his most important Kodesh days, he has set aside for us. It calls for his people, his children, to abstain from money, to abstain from business, to afflict themselves in the manner of money, and also to give, to be giving. There's a reason for that. And today, talking about the Shemitah, which is the Shabbat year, and the Yovel, the Jubilee year, these 2 holidays, these 2 high convocations that Father set aside in the Torah for us to observe, are 2 of the most important observances throughout all the entirety of Torah. They're right up there with the Shabbat and the feasts, the Moedim, the appointed times. And it's for an incredibly crucial reason that you will understand by the time that we're done. But first, we're going to look at the scriptures themselves to see what exactly these particular appointed times are. First, we need to look at, I believe, first off, let's look at the Shemitah. And this is found in a few different places. For example, you will find this in Shemoth, Exodus 22, verses 25 through 7. Also in Weikra, Leviticus, chapter 25, verses 35 through 37. You will find this in Devarim, Deuteronomy, chapter 15, verses 1 through 11. In fact, we are going to look at the Devarim, Deuteronomy. This is where you're going to find the Shemitah, the 7th year Shabbat rest, in these 3 different scrolls or writings of the Pentateuch, the first 5 books of the Torah. And the Devarim, Deuteronomy section is really the most thorough. So we're going to look at this rather than the Shemoth and the Weikra, the Exodus and Leviticus passages. But you can also go and look at those if you would like as a reference. At the end of every 7 years, you must cancel debts. This is how it is to be done. Every creditor shall cancel any loan, or every creditor shall cancel any loan they have made to a fellow Israelite. They shall not require payment from anyone among their own people, because Yah's time for canceling debts has been proclaimed. You may require payment from a foreigner, but you must cancel any debt your fellow Israelite owes you. However, there need be no poor people among you, for in the land Yah your Elohim is giving you to possess as your inheritance, he will richly enrich you. If only you fully obey Yah your Elohim and are careful to follow all these commands I am giving you today. For Yah your Elohim will enrich you as he has promised, and you will lend to many nations, but will borrow from none. You will rule over many nations, but none will rule over you. If anyone is poor among your fellow Israelites in any of the towns of the land Yah your Elohim is giving you, do not be hard-hearted or tight-fisted toward them. Rather, be open-handed and freely lend them whatever they need. Be careful not to harbor this wicked thought. The 7th year, the year for canceling debts, is near, so that you do not show ill will toward the needy among your fellow Israelites and give them nothing. They may then appeal to Yah against you, and you will be found guilty of sin. Give generously to them and do so without a grudging heart. Then, because of this, Yah your Elohim will enrich you in all of your work and in everything you put your hand to. There will always be poor people in the land. Therefore, I command you to be open-handed toward your fellow Israelites who are poor and needy in your land. Now, the Loic or Leviticus 25, 35 to 37 passage, let's just look at these two because it's one paragraph apiece. If any of your fellow Israelites become poor and are unable to support themselves among you, help them as you would a foreigner and stranger, so that they can continue to live among you. Do not take interest or any profit from them, but fear your Elohim, so that they may continue to live among you. You must not lend them money at interest or sell them food at a profit. Shemoth, Exodus 22, chapter 25 through 27. If you lend money to one of my people among you who is needy, do not treat it like a business deal. Charge no interest. If you take your neighbor's cloak as a pledge, return it by sunset, because that cloak is the only covering your neighbor has. What else can they sleep in? When they cry out to me, I will hear, for I am compassionate. So, the Shemitah year, the Shabbat year, was basically as such. During that year, it was to be a year of rest. So, you were to, concerning crops and agriculture, you could do no sowing of any kind of your fields. None. They had to rest, lie fallow, which means untilled, and you had to this is another thing, you had to let your fields remain open to both animals and people to come through your field, and they could take freely of whatever naturally grew that year of itself. They could freely take and eat. You could not plant. Not only could you not plant and sow that year so the ground could replenish itself, but anything that grew naturally of itself, other people could have free access to, and you couldn't stop them. Also, the Shemitah year was most crucially marked by an entire year where essentially business transactions were null and void. So you had to forgive debt. Think about this in context, let's say that today you were to go out and get an $80,000 truck and you put it on payment finance. And let's say in 7 years or up to 6 years before the 7th, you were to pay, let's say, $60,000 back, that $80,000, or maybe less. By the time the 7th year would come along, in today's terms, the bank that you have the loan through, they would have to forgive that debt. They have to write it off. So the rest of that $20,000, you don't have to pay. The truck is now yours. No more payment. That debt literally ceases to exist. That is exactly what that would be like in modern terms. So any kind of debt whatsoever was not only forgiven, but you were also commanded that you were to open your hand freely and give to those in need, those you saw who needed it. You also had to release those who were indentured in servitude. So basically, if you had a maidservant, a woman, female servant, or a manservant, you had to let them go. You couldn't keep them perpetually. You had to set them free. Now, of course, these laws were specific to the people of Israel, not pagan foreigners out and about, but those of their brethren. The Shemitah year was basically a year of graciousness, mercy, and a year of generosity. That's what it was marked by. And Father promised them, he told them that if they did those things, that he would greatly enrich them, that he would do very good unto them. In fact, when you go down here into verse 10, give generously to them and do so without a grudging heart. Then because of this, Yah your Elohim will enrich you in all your work and in everything you put your hand to. So Father's saying, if you did this, you observe that year properly, that he would enrich you greatly. Another thing about the 7th year rest was also like for the land to rest and lie fallow, was that Father said, don't worry about in that Shabbat year, saying, oh, if I don't plant this year, what am I going to eat? He said that in the 6th year, he would cause your harvest to be so plentiful that it would give you enough for that year and the 7th Shabbat year. He said you would eat on the year, the produce of the 6th year and the 7th year, and you would still be eating into the 8th year, and you would have to end up throwing out. He literally said you would have to throw out the old because of the new that he would then enrich you with in the 8th year, or the 1st year after the 7th, but technically the 8th year. So that was the Shemitah. Now, the Yovel, the Jubilee, was an even bigger event. The Yovel was essentially a year of marked every 50 years. So you would count 7 Shemitah, 7 cycles of Shabbat years of release. 7 times 7 equals 49. And on that year, you would prepare for the Jubilee, which was to come the next year on the 50th. So on the 49th year, the Shemitah year, that 7th cycle, you were to observe your Shabbat year of release. And then the very next year after that, there was the Yovel year. The Yovel, the Jubilee year, was marked as a special time in which not just debts were to be forgiven, but more specifically, it was a time in which the property, real estate, that was taken or bartered over transactions. So let's say that you had a brother, Yisraelite brother, who had sold his property, or in a modern sense, understand it like this. If somebody today were to default on their payment, on their house payment, and the bank were to repossess it, well, in modern context, the bank would only be able to hold your home for up to 50 years. At the 50th year, they would have to release your home and your property back to you. You could go back to your home. There's no more debt on it. It is yours. No strings attached. That's basically what the Yovel, the Jubilee year, was. You would go back. They would have to release the property to you. The only occasion in which you could keep the property was if the home, the house in question, was within a walled city. And the main reason for that was because in walled cities, especially ancient cities, usually people's homes were just places that were practically stacked on top of one another throughout their cities and their towns. So people who lived in towns and cities, they didn't really have any property. If you lived in like Yerushalayim back then, you had no property. You just had a home. That was it. It's not exactly like today. I mean, today you go to some cities, some people can have a little bit of property, not a whole lot. But you still see in most cities today, especially bigger cities, you go, you see apartments stacked on top of one another. You go to your little urban areas, and pretty much, unless you go out to a suburb where people have a yard, you go actually to a proper city, people just have their home, their apartment, or their penthouse, their condo. They have no property, no land to speak of. So part of the reason why in the year of Yovel that homes within walled cities wasn't to be released is because it was just a home by itself. There was no property attached to it. There was nothing generational to it. It wasn't part of an inheritance that your family had given you over a long period of time. It was just one home by itself. But any property, any home whatsoever outside of walled cities, out in villages where people actually had land that had been willed to them, so think about it in the context of out here, like in places like where I live in the country, where you have people that have home and land, acres of land, that would be property that if you lost it, then in the 50th year of Yovel, Jubilee, then it would be released. No strings attached. All right, so give me just one moment, and we're going to look at the scripture for the Yovel. Now, I do want to clarify something because I know that people say that within the actual passage of the Shemitah year, the 7th year, Shabbat year of release, that it's not in the text, that you also have to release your male and female servants. But that was synonymous. Basically, the Shemitah year was also synonymous with releasing your servants because Father had another separate law in which every 7 years, if you had a hired servant from among the people of Israel, your brethren, you had to release a servant after every 7 years anyway. You couldn't keep them. So because the Shemitah, the year of debt release and forgiveness, coincided with how you were to release your fellow Israelite brother who you had hired as a servant, he became poor, wasn't able to pay for himself anymore, and he had to sell himself to you. At the end of 7 years, you had to release servants as well. So really the Shemitah year, debt forgiveness and releasing of servants, they went hand in hand with each other. But the Yovel, the Jubilee year, you find this in Vayikra Leviticus chapter 25. And we're going to read it, and then we're going to break it down in a very common, simple, plain English so you can grasp what the Yovel was in a more simplistic manner, kind of stripped away from the more archaic biblical terminology. And Yah spoke to Moses, on Mount Sinai, saying, "Speak to the children of Israel, and say to them," and this first part is covering the Shemitah, the 7th year, Sabbath rest again, Shabbat rest. "When you come into the land which I give you, then the land shall keep a Shabbat to Yah. 6 years you shall sow your field, and 6 years you shall prune your vineyard and gather its fruit. But in the 7th year there shall be a Shabbat of solemn rest for the land, a Shabbat to Yah. You shall neither sow your field nor prune your vineyard. What grows of its own accord of your harvest you shall not reap, nor gather the grapes of your untended vine, for it is a year of rest for the land. And the Shabbat produce of the land shall be food for you, your male and female servants, your hired man, and the stranger who dwells with you, for your livestock and the beasts that are in your land. All its produce shall be for food." So that's what grows of itself, meaning without your hand tending the field, planting, sowing seed. Now, this covers the year, the Yovel, the Jubilee year. "And you shall count 7 Shabbats of years for yourself, 7 times 7 years, and the time of the 7th Shabbat of years shall be to you 49 years. Then you shall cause the trumpet of the Yovel, Jubilee, to sound on the 10th day of the 7th month, on the day of atonement, Yom Teruah. You shall make the trumpet to sound throughout all your land. And you shall consecrate the 50th year, and proclaim liberty throughout all the land to all its inhabitants. It shall be a Yovel, or Jubilee, for you," which Yovel, Jubilee, basically it's interpreted to meaning a release. In fact, the proper definition, if you really want to just kind of get it exactly, it comes from basically the idea of freedom or sending off. So a release. Specifically the idea of sending something off, giving freedom to something. That was the idea, the concept behind the word Yovel, just so you know. Yovel, Jubilee. "It shall be a Jubilee for you, a Yovel, and each of you shall return to his possession, and each of you shall return to his family. That 50th year shall be a Yovel, Jubilee, to you. And in it you shall neither sow nor reap what grows of its own accord, nor gather the grapes of your untended vine, for it is the Yovel, Jubilee. It shall be holy to you. You shall eat its produce from the field. In this year of Yovel, each of you shall return to his possession. And if you sell anything to your neighbor or buy from your neighbor's hand, you shall not oppress one another. According to the number of years after the Jubilee, you shall buy from your neighbor. And according to the number of years of crops, he shall sell to you. According to the multitude of years you shall increase its price, and according to the fewer number of years you shall diminish its price. For he sells to you according to the number of the years of the crops. Therefore you shall not oppress one another, but you shall fear your Elohim, for I am Yah your Elohim. So you shall observe my statutes and keep my judgments, and perform them, and you will dwell in the land in safety. Then the land will yield its fruit, and you will eat your fill and dwell there in safety. And if you say, what shall we eat in the 7th year, since we shall not sow nor gather in our produce? Then I will command my enrichment on you in the 6th year, and it will bring forth produce enough for 3 years. And you shall sow in the 8th year, and eat old produce until the 9th year. Actually, it was the 9th year. Look at that. Until its produce comes in, you shall eat of the old harvest. So he would give you from the 6th year all the way up to the 9th. He'd give you 3 years to eat. So produce for the 6th, in which you're sowing, then the 7th year, the Shabbat, and even the 8th year. So you have the Shemitah, Sabbath year. And on the 49th cycle, on the 50th year, you have the Shemitah, the 7th Shabbat year, and then the Yovel year, coinciding 1 year right after. So on the 50th year, you actually have 2 years back to back of total Shabbat. You can't sow your field, can't do anything like that. We'll get into in a moment just how deep and complex that is. And then only then in the 9th year can you actually sow again. But they would still need food for that 9th year, because only in the 9th year would they be allowed to start sowing. So they wouldn't actually have anything then to properly eat until the 10th year. So Father says he will give them produce for 3 years. So for that 7th, 8th, 9th year, they would have plenty of food. And you shall sow it says here, you shall sow in the 8th year and eat old produce until the 9th year, until its produce comes in, you shall eat of the old harvest. Now, some people count that a little bit differently, because since the Shabbat, the Shemitah year, would be on that 7th year. And then the very next year after that, you're going to be observing the Yovel year, that would be on the 8th year. Those are 2 years that you can't have any tilling, any produce. So you're not gaining anything from the land. So the way that one way to properly count that would be, Father would be giving his enrichment to you. Once you sowed in the 6th year, he'd be giving you enrichment to get you through the 7th year, the 8th year, and then even the 9th year, because the 9th year you would be sowing. But you wouldn't really be gleaning a proper full harvest till the end of that 9th year to keep you satiated then until the 10th. So, technically you could look at it and you could say, the Father, his enrichment will be going from even up to the 9th year, leading you into the 10th. Once the process of agriculturally sowing was back to normal again. But different people count it different ways, but the proper way to look at it would be that, again, the 6th year produce, he would so greatly enrich that it would get you through the 7th, 8th, and then even to the 9th year, and you would still be largely being provided for in that until everything fully returns to normal by the 10th year. The land shall not be sold permanently, for the land is mine, for you are strangers and sojourners with me. And in all the land of your possession you shall grant redemption of the land. If one of your brethren becomes poor and has sold some of his possession, and if his redeeming relative comes to redeem it, then he may redeem what his brother sold. Or if the man has no one to redeem it, but he himself becomes able to redeem it, then let him count the years since its sale, and restore the remainder to the man to whom he sold it, that he may return to his possession. But if he is not able to have it restored to himself, then what was sold shall remain in the hand of him who bought it until the year of Yovel, Jubilee. And in the Yovel it shall be released, and he shall return to his possession. So basically, if a man were to sell his property in his home, and let's say that he sold it for 10 years and he was poor for a period of time, and he got to a point wherever he was able to provide for himself again, he could get the land back and redeem it, basically pay to get it back, then he would count how much time was left for that period that whoever he sold it to had it, and then he would buy it back. Or if he had a relative who wanted to do it for him, then he would calculate the amount of time left for that burden, that debt, and he would pay for it, and then he could give it to his brother so he could go back to his land. If a man sells a house in a walled city, then he may redeem it within a whole year after it is sold. Within a full year he may redeem it. But if it is not redeemed within the space of a full year, then the house in the walled city shall belong permanently to him who bought it throughout his generations. It shall not be released in the Jubilee. However, the houses of villages which have no wall around them shall be counted as the fields of the country. They may be redeemed, and they shall be released in the Yovel, Jubilee. Nevertheless, the cities of the Levites, or the Levites, and the houses and the cities of their possession, the Levites or Levites, may redeem at any time. And if a man purchases a house from the Levites, then the house that was sold in the city of his possession shall be released in the Yovel. For the houses and the cities of the Levites are their possession among the children of Israel. But the field or the common land of their cities may not be sold, for it is their perpetual possession. That was because, being that they were the Kohen, or the Kohanim, they were the priests, they had a set allotment of cities given to them. They didn't actually have any land that was set aside to them and sectioned off. They had cities. Every tribe had to give them so many cities and land within each of their own tribes. And because that's all the Kohanim, the priests, had for produce for their families, mainly other families who were helping to produce and take care of things at home, naturally their homes, their fields couldn't be sold in perpetuity, or they couldn't be sold in a permanent fashion. They had to be released to them, because that's all they had. They didn't have any actual lasting possession within borders of the land of Israel, like the land of Yehuda, Judah, or the land of Reuven, of Reuben. All they had was cities within the territories, the tribal allotments of their brethren. If one of your brethren becomes poor and falls into poverty among you, then you shall help him, like a stranger or a sojourner, that he may live with you. When a sojourner, basically someone who travels and wanders from place to place. Take no usury or interest from him. And when you think of the word usury, and I know that's really not a term that people so much use anymore, but specifically, the term usury has to do with the practice of lending money at unreasonably high rates of interest. Take no usury or interest from him, but fear your Elohim, that your brother may live with you. You shall not lend him your money for usury, interest, nor lend him your food at a profit. I am Yah your Elohim, who brought you out of the land of Mitzrayim, Egypt, to give you the land of Canaan, and to be your Elohim. And if one of your brethren who dwells by you becomes poor, and sells himself to you, you shall not compel him to serve as a slave. As a hired servant and a sojourner, he shall be with you, and shall serve you until the year of Jubilee, or Yovel. And then he shall depart from you, he and his children with him, and shall return to his own family. He shall return to the possession of his fathers, for they are my servants, whom I brought out of the land of Mitzrayim, Egypt. They shall not be sold as slaves. You shall not rule over him with rigor, meaning viciously, arduously, in a heavy-handed manner. But you shall serve your Elohim. And as for your male and female slaves whom you may have from the nations that are around you, from them you may buy male and female slaves. Moreover, you may buy the children of the strangers who dwell among you, and their families who are with you, which they beget or birth in your land, and they shall become your property. And you may take them as an inheritance for your children after you, to inherit them as a possession. They shall be your permanent slaves. But regarding your brethren, the children of Israel, you shall not rule over one another with rigor. Now, if a sojourner or a stranger close to you becomes rich, and one of your brethren who dwells by him becomes poor, and sells himself to the stranger or sojourner close to you, or to a member of the stranger's family, after he is sold, he may be redeemed again. One of his brothers may redeem him, or his uncle's son may redeem him, or anyone who is near kin to him and his family may redeem him, or if he is able, he may redeem himself. Thus he shall reckon with him who bought him. The price of his release shall be according to the number of years, from the year that he was sold to him until the year of Jubilee, or Yovel. It shall be according to the time of a hired servant for him. If there are still many years remaining, according to them he shall repay the price of his redemption from the money with which he was bought. And if there remain but a few years until the year of Yovel, Jubilee, then he shall reckon with him, and according to his years he shall repay him the price of his redemption. He shall be with him as a yearly hired servant, and he shall not rule with rigor over him in your sight. And if he is not redeemed in these years, then he shall be released in the year of Yovel. he and his children with him. For the children of Israel are servants to me. They are my servants, whom I brought out of the land of Mitzrayim, Egypt. I am Yah, your Elohim. Now, in more simple, plain, clear English, what the Yovel year, how you essentially observe it, is the biblical requirement is that the Yovel year was to be treated like a sabbatical year with the land lying fallow, but also required the compulsory return of all property to its original owners or their heirs, except the houses of laymen, common people, within walled cities, in addition to the manumission or release of all Yisraelite indentured or hired servants. The biblical regulations state that the land was to rest a Shabbat when the children of Israel came to the land that Elohim was giving them. Since the 49th year was already a sabbatical year, the land was required to be left fallow during it. But if the 50th year also had to be kept fallow as the Yovel, then no new crops would be available for 2 years, and only the summer fruits would be available for the following year. So essentially, the Yovel year was marked by 2 primary things: the release of property, real estate, and the release of servants. So even though every 7th year, with the Shemitah year, the Shabbat year of rest, even though basically every 7 years you had to release your servant anyway, the Yovel year was essentially a repeat of that. So to show how Father wanted equality, meaning economic equality, meaning the ability for people to be able to have release and freedom from debts and hard bondage. And both on the 49th Shabbat year of rest and release, followed by the 50th year of Yovel, Jubilee, it was basically double layered in that period of time where between the 49th and 50th year, anyone who was a servant most assuredly had to be released. But the Yovel was marked by that. The release of servants and the release of property, of real estate, unless it was within, again, a walled city. And if you think about it in practical terms, the reason that made more sense is because in a walled city, especially in biblical times, it was a lot harder to keep constant record of one little home, especially when so many of them were stacked on or near one another. It was harder to keep constant track over a period of 50 years for a home that belonged to somebody within a city where a whole bunch of people live. It was easier to keep track of what belonged to people when it was in an unwalled village, when it was someone's home and their land. It was easier to keep track of that. I mean, could you imagine, for instance, as a comparison, a city, say you go to New York City, and there's a huge apartment building, and there's one apartment, apartment 213C, and somebody gets kicked out of that apartment. Would you imagine keeping track of that one apartment, who that belonged to, for 50 years? That would be difficult with so many people coming in and out all the time. But you go out, to the country, for instance, somebody who owns a home with property boundaries and markers, survey stakes, it's going to be easier to keep track of who that property belonged to going back 50 years than somebody who lived in a city in an apartment or a condo that building alone is seen so much in and out. And also, just like apartment buildings today, you have a lot of times the people who own the building, called landlords today, they'll change hands a lot of times. In 50 years, you might have 2 or 3 different owners of one apartment building. So it's hard to keep records. So that was one reason why that walled cities, as long as it wasn't the Levites, that they were to be, you'd have 1 year to redeem, basically get back the dwelling, the home you had in a city. And if after that time you didn't redeem it, or your next of kin, someone who was able to redeem you, did not do so for you, then the people who owned it, it was to be theirs perpetually. But anything that was not within the extent of a city, a walled city, country dwellings, basically, or a rural dwelling, then after 50 years, it didn't matter if the people that you sold it to, they had it for 30 years. It was to be given back to you. So let's say, for instance, even where it talks about how the figuring of, coming up to the year of Yovel, of Jubilee, how you were to even do things like transactions, how you were to do things concerning the matter of selling crops or even the transaction of real estate or homes. Let's say that you had the Yovel the 50th year, and let's say 3 years after the Yovel, you became poor and you lost your home. Well, when the year of Yovel came along, 47 years later, down the road, it was to be released to you. But let's say that you were to lose it in the 3rd year. And let's say 6 years after the old Yovel, the last Yovel, 6 years after, meaning 3 years after you lost it, let's say 6 years since the old Yovel, you became profitable and you were able to buy the land back. You were to count up and figure how many years until the next Yovel, figure up the price for how many years that particular transaction of whoever took your land or whatever it might be. You would calculate the price. The Yovel, the 50th year, was set as a standard time for how you were to count the transaction period. Okay, well, there's this many years. Let's say there's 44 years until the next Yovel. So either you decide to redeem and buy your land back, or maybe you have family who's willing to do it for you. Then they go to the person that owns your land and you talk it over. You count how many years left or until the year of Yovel. You come to an agreed upon price for how long it'll be within that cycle of years, and then you pay that amount. Likewise, let's say that there's only 10 years until the next Yovel, or 5 years. Let's say that 5 years before the next Yovel, you become poor, you lose your home. And 2 years later, so 3 years until the next Yovel, on the 47th year, 2 years after you lost it, you're able to redeem it. Or you have family who's willing to redeem it for you. Since there's only 3 years left into the Yovel, they tell the people who own your home, they're like, okay, so there's only 3 years left to the Yovel, so we're going to pay the price for this remaining 3 years. Here you go. And now the property can be given back to you. The same was said for crops. And in the year of Yovel, most especially, when you were doing matters such as, exchanging crops with one another, you had to do so faithfully. So you couldn't take advantage of one another in the Yovel year. You couldn't say, okay, well, I'm going to say, this many for, this price and try to price gouge one another. You had to be fair to one another in the Yovel year. But namely speaking, the most simple practical way to understand the Yovel was that, again, a release of real estate, personal property or home, and the release of servants. Now, right there up front, we have 2 incredibly important Kodesh days or events Father set aside. The 7th year Shabbat rest, which was a year that you were to not sow your crops at all. None. You had to do no ordinary work, no business transactionary work. It was a year of rest. You had to release, because the Shemitah year coincided with the 7 years, you had to release your hired servants, your brethren anyway. 7th year, no business transactions. You had to forgive debt completely. So you couldn't only not sow, till your fields, but you had to let any and all debt go. So any kind of a loan, no matter what it was, you had to let it go. Total forgiveness. It was literally known as the year of debt forgiveness. And then every 50th year, you had the Yovel, which was kind of like a grandiose form of the Shemitah, the Shabbat year. Total release of personal property, walls, homes, release of servants. These were release years. They were years of grace. They were years of giving. And the reason for that is very simple. And you find it repeatedly all throughout the scriptures. You find many, many times, even in the Shabbat, the annual 7th-day Shabbat, you find this repeatedly brought up. One thing that you see is in the Shabbat year, the 7th day, all the time, every single Shabbat day, Shabbat year, or 7th-day annual Shabbat, you had to do no business transaction work of any kind. So you had to afflict yourself. Total affliction. No business transaction whatsoever. Same thing with the Moedim. The feast was the same way. On the first day, on the last day, the seventh day, no kind of ordinary work whatsoever. Especially with regards to mainly in Yom Teruah and Yom Kippur, the day of Feast of Trumpets and the Feast of the Day of Atonement. Namely, those were considered Shabbats as well, so no business transactions. But on the first and seventh day, or first and last days of the Moedim, the feasts, you weren't to do any kind of work. You were to celebrate and rejoice like you would at any kind of festival, like I explained when we were talking about the Moedim. And then, of course, every Shabbat, annual seventh-day Shabbat, no business transaction of any kind, no business dealings. And then with the Yom Teruah, Feast of Trumpets, and Yom Kippur, they were also considered Shabbat, days of rest. So you were to have no kind of business transaction work whatsoever. And then you had the seventh year of release, of debt release, total forgiveness of debt, letting your male and female servants go. And then you had the Yovel, where you had to let go any and all personal property or real estate or homes that had been seized from someone who had been forced to sell them. This was Father's command in Torah. It was flat out his command. It had to be done. A very interesting facet of Scripture. You will find, for instance, that Father has a very particular command for how he demands, without contest, no argument. It's not up for debate. It is a certainty of how you are to handle three particular groups of people: the fatherless, the widow, and the poor and the needy. In Yaakov, or James, chapter 127, religion that Yah, or Elohim, our Father, accepts as pure and faultless is this: to look after orphans and widows in their distress, and to keep oneself from being polluted by the world. Yeshayahu Isaiah 1:17, learn to do right, seek justice, defend the oppressed, take up the cause of the fatherless, plead the case of the widow. Devarim, Deuteronomy 10:18, he defends the cause of the fatherless and the widow, and loves the foreigner residing among you, giving them food and clothing. Tehillim, Psalm 68:5, a father to the fatherless, a defender of widows, is Elohim in his Kodesh, meaning set apart or holy dwelling. Zechariah, or Zechariah, chapter 7, verses 9 through 10. This is what Yah Almighty said: administer true justice, show mercy and compassion to one another. Do not oppress the widow or the fatherless, the foreigner or the poor. Do not plot evil against each other. Yirmiyahu, Jeremiah 49:11. Leave your fatherless children. I will keep them alive. Your widows too can depend on me. Also, if we look at Mishlei, Proverbs 19:17, whoever is generous to the poor lends to Yah, and he will repay him for his deeds. So literally it is saying that if you lend to the poor, you are in essence therefore lending to Yah. You are giving to Father by giving to the poor, and that Father will repay you for that deed. Also in Me'ashishlikim, Acts chapter 20, verse 35, and all things I have shown you, that by working hard in this way we must help the weak and remember the words of the Master Yahshua, how he himself said, it is more enriched to give than to receive. Corinthia Bet, 2 Corinthians chapter 9:7, each one must give as he has decided in his heart, not reluctantly or under compulsion, for Elohim loves a cheerful giver. Luke 6:38, give and it will be given to you. Good measure, pressed down, shaken together, running over, will be put into your lap. For with the measure you use, it will be measured back to you. Ivram, Hebrews 13:16, do not neglect to do good and to share what you have, for such sacrifices are pleasing to Elohim. Mishle Proverbs 22:9. Whoever has a bountiful eye will be enriched, for he shares his bread with the poor. Yochanan Aleph, 1 John 3:17. But if anyone has the world's goods and sees his brother in need, yet closes his heart against him, how does Elohim's love abide in him? Matityahu, Matthew 5:42. Give to the one who begs from you, and do not refuse the one who will borrow from you. Mishle, Proverbs 14:31. Whoever oppresses a poor man insults his maker, but he who is generous to the needy honors him. Corinthia Bet, 2 Corinthians 9:6. The point is this: whoever sows sparingly will also reap sparingly, and whoever sows bountifully will also reap bountifully. Mishle, Proverbs 28:27. Whoever gives to the poor will not want, but he who hides his eyes will get many a curse. So if you give to the poor, you will not be in want, but if you hide your eyes, you will receive many curses. Mishle, Proverbs 31:9. Open your mouth, judge righteously, defend the rights of the poor and needy. Corinthia Bet, 2 Corinthians 9:10. He who supplies seed to the sower and bread for food will supply and multiply your seed for sowing and increase the harvest for your righteousness. Mishle, Proverbs 11:25. Whoever brings enrichment will be enriched, and one who waters will himself be watered. Matityahu, Matthew 6:19-21. This is helping to instigate people how to give. And for everybody who's greedy and doesn't want to give because they're attached to their treasures, do not lay, these are Yahshua's words, mind you, do not lay up for yourselves treasures on earth, where moth and rust destroy and where thieves break in and steal. But lay up for yourselves treasures in heaven, where neither moth nor rust destroys and where thieves do not break in and steal. For where your treasure is, there your heart will be also. Here's a really good one for people who are wealthy. Timotheus Aleph, or 1 Timothy chapter 6, verses 17-19. As for the rich in this present age, charge them not to be haughty, nor to set their hopes on the uncertainty of riches, but on Elohim, who richly provides us with everything to enjoy. They are to do good, to be rich in good works, to be generous and ready to share, thus storing up treasure for themselves as a good foundation for the future, so that they may take hold of that which is truly life. That is what rich people are to do. They are to do good, to be rich in good works, to be generous and ready to share, thus storing up treasure for themselves as a good foundation for the future, so that they may take hold of that which is truly life. Don't be haughty. Don't set your riches, your hopes on the uncertainty of riches, but on Elohim, who richly provides us with everything to enjoy. It says Father richly provides us with everything to enjoy. Not us, not through our vain pursuit of riches and stuff. Father provides us with riches. He takes care. We're to set our minds on being generous, being ready to share. Be rich in good works. That is what we are to do. That is what wealthy people are to do. This goes right along in hand with it, Matthew 5:16. In the same way, let your light shine before others, so that they may see your good works and give glory to your Father who is in heaven. Mishle, Proverbs 21:13. Whoever closes his ear to the cry of the poor will himself call out and not be answered. So, and even here in Timothy's Olive, 1 Timothy 5:8, but if anyone does not provide for his relatives, and especially for members of his household, he has denied the faith and is worse than an unbeliever. Again, Timothy's Olive, 1 Timothy 6:10. For the love of money is a root of all kinds of evils. It is through this craving that some have wandered away from the faith and pierced themselves with many pangs. Go on and on and on. But what is the point of this? All throughout Scripture, Father had a solid command for his people. That you were to give to the poor and the needy, to the fatherless and the widow. Now, it is very important to categorize what the poor and the needy are today. I'm not talking about people who go out here on street corners, people who become beggars, panhandlers today. Unfortunately, especially here in the U.S., ever since the Biden administration, when they were giving crack pipes out to people, there admittedly is a big difference today between a lot of the homeless people of today and what truly poor and needy people were like in the biblical scriptural era. Nowadays, you have a lot of people that go out who become panhandlers and beggars, and they are preying on the compassion of other people. They are fully capable of working. They are fully capable of getting a job. I mean, how many people I see stand out holding a sign on hot days in the middle of freezing cold temperature, when it's raining, and you think to yourself, they're fully able-bodied, you can tell. Why not just go get a job, especially today where almost any place is hiring? A lot of the people today that go out and they beg, these panhandlers, so many of these people, there are a lot of them who, they do it to prey on other people. They aren't actually poor. There are a lot of these people who are drug addicts, people who are alcoholics, people who have chosen to put themselves in that position because they have chosen a life of slothery, basically being lazy. They don't want to do anything. They don't want to work. They don't want to earn their keep. They just want to prey on other people's goodwill. There is a difference between people in Father's context of poor and needy and people that just go out and prey on others' compassion because they would rather get a handout, that instead of writing on their sign, will work for food or will work for money, just please give me money. There's a difference between those two different types of people. There are people out here in this world that are truly poor and needy. There are people that are born in situations, they're born in low-income areas, they don't have a very good education. There are people who, they literally live in very poor economic areas. They don't have a lot of economic potential. Maybe they don't live in an area with much industry. Maybe they live there, and a lot of tourist towns are this way. I know there's a lot of coastal beach locales that are that way. There's not a lot of opportunity, not a lot of industry, not a lot of places that hire. You can't make as much as you could if you move to an area with more industry. There are people that legitimately do fall on hard times. There are people that work hard. There are people that work 2 jobs. But because of where they live, extenuating circumstances, they don't have much. Maybe they have a lot of kids. Maybe they have medical debt. Maybe their parent walked out on them. Maybe their spouse walked out on them, so they have to now take care of maybe a mother or a father, or usually it's women who have to take care of their children by themselves because dad walked out. There are people that truly fall in hard times, that try, but they're poor. They cannot help their situation. They try, but they're not as enriched. They have not been dealt the kind of hand that other people have who live more affluently. There are truly people in this life, many people that are needy. They are in need. They need a hand. They were not enriched with the same fortune that somebody else was. And in those situations, if you are the kind of person that you have been enriched and given much, it's no different than the parable that Joshua told when he said that to those who have been entrusted with much, much would be required. If you are somebody who has been enriched and given a lot, if you have been enriched with either, let's say you started your own business and it took off, you made a lot of money with your business, or maybe you won the lottery, or somehow you ended up with a lot of money, a lot of financial wealth and means, and you do not use that wealth to help other people, the truly poor and needy, and I don't mean going out and giving a $20 bill to a panhandler. I mean, you see somebody, again, let's say you see a woman struggling to raise her kids, or you see somebody who lost their job. Maybe they got laid off from work, and they're trying to find a job. They're trying to find work, but it's hard. They're struggling to make it. You have the ability to help them. Or maybe you see somebody who obviously they're on hard times. Maybe somebody's having a yard sale, and you can tell by the state of their home, they don't have much. You go to buy something, and instead of just paying them what it's worth, you pay them a little extra. Or you go out to eat somewhere and you tip your server really good. Or you know about somebody who has maybe been in a situation where you see their home is in disrepair. You see they've obviously been through some hardships. You have a lot. You've been given a surplus. It is your scripturally commanded obligation. Father commands, and we have looked over these again and again and again. Father commands that concerning the fatherless, those who do not have parents, namely fathers who are providers, widows, women who do not have husbands to help provide for them, and the needy in general, people who are legitimately down on their luck. It is explicitly commanded by Yah Elohim. It is your right. It is your duty. It is a command, not a suggestion. You are to take of the wealth that has been given to you, and you are to give to others. The way that so many wealthy people, what they call the 1%, and not just the 1%, not just the people who are multimillionaires and billionaires, but even people who are just affluent and have a lot of money because they own their own business, it succeeded, they live comfortably, they live really well. People who have means, who have been entrusted with much. You have not been given that money. You've not been given that affluency. Your business didn't take off. You didn't win the lottery. You didn't come into a lot of money so you can turn around and get a nice, huge home for yourself that you don't need, a whole bunch of cars you don't need, a whole bunch of properties and a whole bunch of material stuff you don't need, more than you're ever going to be able to use. One person, even a household of people, there's only so much stuff you're going to buy that you're ever actually going to be able to use. You've only got so many hands. You only got so much time in the day. How are you going to use 6 vehicles, 6 cars? Some of them are going to get left in your shop, in your garage, covered up. If you have a massive, several thousand square foot mansion, and your home is not full of people, what's the point of having that big home? If you don't have a head count, or if you're not holding constant celebrations and festivities, inviting people into your home to revel, have merrymaking, if you got 2 or 3 people living in a big several thousand square foot home where there are entire rooms that never even get used, and you dump tons of that money you were enriched with into splendor for yourself, just so you can say, oh, look at this nice big architectural masterpiece that is my home. You go outside and your place is manicured and pristinely landscaped to a T. You've got a home here, a home there, and the more money you have, the more affluent people are today, the more they have. I have known people of wealth. I have known people who had a lot of money. I don't mean just like small business owners, people that they went out, started up a random business and they made it. They're not rich, but they're well-to-do. They worked their whole life, got the business off the ground. Now most of their employees and maybe the manager they selected for the business, whoever's running it for them, mostly now they're running things, and now the people are older and now they're kind of enjoying the fruits of their labor. I don't mean just those people. I mean, I have met people before who are in the 1% category. I mean, they are so wealthy. They've got their own private planes and jets and a home here and a home there. They're living like movie stars and rock stars. And this is important to preface this. I'm not speaking from the perspective of some liberal, socialist, communistic wacko who says rich people are bad and evil because, oh, boo-hoo, they have more than me and I don't like it, so the government needs to take what they have and give it to me because I don't want to work. I'm not talking from that perspective. I am getting to a point right now from a scriptural perspective and from how Yah Elohim, the creator of all things, commanded man, specifically men who've been given plenty to live. How he commanded those of much, those of means, to use their wealth. If you have been given much, and again, I don't care if it was something that you worked yourself, you worked hard your whole life, you stumbled onto a business or some kind of a venture that you made a ton of money, or you came into that money somehow. The only proper use for what you have been given, the plenty you've been given, is not to sit around living like a fat rat where you are literally living over and beyond your means. And I don't mean you can't have a nice home. I don't mean you can't have a nice car. I don't mean you can't go on vacations. You and your family, you cannot enjoy the fruits of your labor. But there is a point, and it's a very clear line, where you are now living above and beyond your means. If you can have a nice, well-built home that's more than spacious and size enough for you and however many people live in your home, you can have maybe one or two nice, well-dependable cars. Maybe it's the model and the model, make, and kind of car you like. Maybe family car, car for travel, whatever. That's practical. What's the practicality in having 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 cars all sitting around in a big, huge shop? You don't drive all those cars. You're gonna have favorites, and there's a whole bunch of others just sitting around just falling into disuse. And my dad, who is a jack of all trades and a mechanic, he's always said, it's true, vehicles do not like being left to sit. They like to be drove. And if you leave them to sit, gas in the tank can go bad, especially ethanol gas. There are a host of other issues and problems that, especially if you don't store a car properly, that over time, the battery can corrode and go bad. All kinds of issues and problems can occur with a vehicle that sees no use. There's no need, if you've got a nice home, a real nice home, there's no need for you to have 10 other homes, extravagant palaces in however many other states or however many other countries if you don't routinely go to and use those homes. Now, it's one thing if you got a modest home, well-built, nice home here, and let's say you go and you travel to the UK a lot. You go there a lot. So you don't have to rent hotel rooms or rent somebody else's home. Maybe you have a modest home over in the UK that you use pretty regularly. That's reasonable. You're making use of it. I know individuals who live up in Canada, and they have a home down in Florida. But they routinely use that home in Florida. They like to vacation in Florida in the colder months in Canada. So they rent their house out in Florida to make money to pay for the taxes and the upkeep of the home. And they'll go and they'll stay at their summer home in Florida during the cold months. That's reasonable. But there are people out here, the vast majority of wealthy people in this world, and I speak from experience because I've met a lot of wealthy people. I know a lot of people with means who all act the same way. 100% of the time, they've all acted the same. This world today has become so greedy and so obsessed with wealth, with materialism, having more and getting more. For people today, enough is never enough. They can be billionaires, but they want more money. They'll step on whoever they need to step on to get more. They will stab anybody in the back to make more profit. They have a super nice home, big mansion, but they want a bigger one. They want something more. They get a really nice car, but now they want to, the very next thing to think about is the nicer, bigger, better one, next year's model they want to get. It is a poison and it's a cancer. And the vast majority of people in this world today who have been given much, who has been given great means, they do not in any way, shape, or form live by the commandments that Yah Elohim set forth for us, all of us to abide by. So many of the wealthy people today in this world, they don't take care of the fatherless and the widow. They don't take care of the poor and the needy, the truly poor and needy. Look, you can say, oh, I'm a millionaire, I'm a billionaire, and I donate to this charity or that charity. But you don't actually know where that money's being funneled to. There are a lot of these organizations out here that rich people donate to, thinking, oh, well, I'm doing a good thing. And those organizations are being run by corrupt corporate bureaucrats that are actually taking that money and they're living high on the hog themselves. Instead, anybody who's wealthy, you travel around, you see somebody who maybe doesn't have the nicest home. Maybe they're having a garage sale. You stop by, you see something, even if you don't need that product, even if you don't need that item, like, yeah, I want to help this person out. Maybe the price tag is $50. So you give them $200. $300. You're a millionaire, you're a billionaire, you can afford it, you leave. You hear about someone who's fallen on hard times. They're legitimately death of a loved one. Maybe you find out a woman's husband walked out on her or died, and she's struggling. She's got children to take care of. You find out she's got a mortgage. You got means. You're a millionaire. You're a billionaire. You do what you can to help provide and take care of her. See if you can pay her mortgage off for her. Or better yet, go up to her mailbox. Or go up to her house. Knock on the door. You hear somebody coming, leave an envelope there of $30,000, $50,000, and run away real fast. There are so many ways people of means can give to people who genuinely need it. People aren't blind. There's a lot of people in want out here, especially today. As corrupt as the world governments are, these corporate leaders, these political leaders, people of power, are so corrupt, and they're squeezing the financial life out of their people in every nation, especially in the United States, but in many, many other nations today, that are squeezing the life out of their people so badly, there are a lot of people in need right now. Nobody's blind. You go about anywhere, you'll be able to see need all around you. You were commanded by Yah Elohim. All the scriptures we read, fatherless, the widow, the needy in general, you are to go out of your way to do for them. Take of the surplus you've been given and help where you can. It doesn't mean that you give literally every single dime you have to your poor, but especially if you have self-sustaining wealth where you're continually bringing in more income to keep that wealth flowing. If you and your family are living comfortably, you got a nice home, dependable vehicles, you take vacations together, you're comfortable, you and your family are good, then the rest of that money, instead of putting it back and just sitting on a whole big mountain of money, or going out and buying a whole bunch of cars and a whole bunch of crap you don't need. Just more stuff. Property after property after property. Give. Give to those who need it. Help enrich them with what you've been enriched with. Because as Joshua said, to those who have been entrusted with much, much will in turn be required from them. Father commanded, we are to give. And it's telling that in the Torah, whether it was the Shabbat day, no work, no monetary work, no business transactions, being commanded to give, being told that on the 7th year, the Shemitah, 7th year, debt forgiveness, debt release, the Yovel, the Jubilee year, total forgiveness of debt. Well, debt is in real estate. Letting home and property go back to the original owners. There's a reason why the Father said to do these things. That he set particular observances, certain days and events aside, that demands for mankind to do the very opposite of what they are ingrained to do. Mankind is not naturally ingrained to shoot themselves in the foot like that and forgive debt and have a time where they literally abstain from getting financial wealth for themselves and instead give to others and let things go and forgive. Father specifically created those days and those times because he commanded us, I demand of you to give, because I, as the Almighty Creator who creates everything and all things belong to me, I choose to give to you. I give you life. I give you everything you have. And because I give to you of that which is mine, I command you therefore to do so to others. And it's so wickedly ironic that the world we live in today lives as far from the biblical, scriptural, Torah-centered commands of how we are to economically treat and deal with one another as you can possibly get. In the United States alone, I know it's the same in a lot of other countries, especially Western countries, but the United States alone, the country that I reluctantly have to call home because it's very expensive to move. A lot of places are in chaos and war right now, but mainly it's very, very expensive to move. I know people who have moved to and from countries who've said it is very, very, very expensive. Unfortunately, I don't have the money to move. But in the country I am forced to call home, here in the U.S., this is one of the greediest, most money-grubbing, avarice-stricken cesspools in the world. There is no debt forgiveness. There is usury, meaning extortion of the common people. Interest, the charging of interests out the wazoo. No such thing as a release of home or property if the bank repossesses it from someone. You know, it's a funny thing. Everything that the Torah, the Father commanded, that we are to do at certain times every year, and then on certain occasions, once every 50 years. It's funny that the United States does exactly the opposite. You know, banks charge interest everybody charges interest. And isn't it a funny thing how for instance, down here in, I believe it's in, right here, Wayikra, Leviticus 25, verses 35 through 37. Here, down here on verse 36, do not take interest or any profit from them, but fear your Elohim so that they may continue to live among you. You must not lend them money at interest or sell them food at a profit. Now, we've read other scriptures today where that same theme is repeated. But flat out, specifically, we are told, do not, under any circumstances, charge interest. Down here in Shemoth, Deuteronomy 15, verses 1 through 11. On verse 6, for Yah your Elohim will enrich you as he has promised, and you will lend to many nations, but will borrow from none. You will rule over many nations, but none will rule over you. This is specifically speaking of releasing debt every 7 years. Deuteronomy 23:19. Do not charge a fellow Israelite interest, whether on money or food or anything else that may earn interest. Now, people will make the argument and they'll say, well, that was Old Testament. That was old law. That doesn't matter anymore. And that was just for the people of Israel. However, because of the renewed covenant, the blood sacrifice of Yahshua that opened up the ability for humans to become children of Yah. Now, when you become a child of Yah, everyone within that renewed covenant is now your brother. And Father, we are explicitly commanded in the renewed covenant, the New Testament scriptures, that we are to live and show compassion, kindness, a giving attitude to all we meet. When you become a child of Yah and you enter into the renewed covenant faith, you are a spiritual inheritor. You have become a spiritual adoptee into the community of the people of Israel, especially if you properly observe Torah, as you should, as we've repeatedly stated in this series. Moreover, if you are a nation, which the United States has long, it's been a slogan. You see it on the coinage, you see it on the dollar currency, in God we trust. You have multiple references in the founding charters and documents of our country, like Declaration of Independence, Constitution. Multiple instances where the framers and the founding fathers made all kinds of Christian inferences and inferences to the Creator, to the Almighty. That even though, ironically, in the First Amendment, this nation could not be a nation for Elohim, for Father, because it is a nation of liberty of religion, freedom of religion, the government being barred to show preference or restrictive prohibitions toward any one religion. Nonetheless, the United States, for years and years and years, has proclaimed a belief and that we are a country and a nation for God. And most of every lawmaker, every senator, every president for the last 250 years who has espoused this, those considered conservatives, have spoken thus with intent to mean the biblical Creator, the biblical God. And is it not funny? It's like, I read a story not long ago that Texas tried to pass this law to where in schools that There are curriculums where scriptural verses has to be integrated in some of the courses that the children are learning, and the Ten Commandments has to be displayed in certain areas, certain institutions, entities. All around the nation, there are states, especially those more conservative than others, that espouse and claim we are a nation under God. So if the United States of America, so many representatives, lawmakers, going back 250 years ago to its founding, even to now, with a lot of conservative Republican lawmakers who like to say, well, we are a nation, biblically, our laws are biblically inspired. And again, it is on our coinage. In God we trust. And even that's not who Father is. Still, to the minds of those who form this country, to the minds of so many today who espouse biblical views and beliefs and want to integrate it into the framework of laws in this country, we are a nation, they say, for God. Well, here's the thing. If you are going to claim that as a nation, you are serving and your Almighty is Father, guess what? You got to put your money where your mouth is. That means if you're going to claim Him, you have to claim everything that comes with Him, which means you have to follow and stay true to His law. His law must be administered because He does not come without law. He has a whole extensive law that must be followed. So if you claim Him as your deity, you must follow His law. And to those who say, well, the Old Testament laws about the debt forgiveness and all this stuff, and it even says, that you couldn't charge interest and all this, and you couldn't have permanent slaves, and that all those laws of release only applied to your brethren, the people of Israel. But, to foreigners, it could be, you could still charge interest, and you could still take servants and slaves, and you could charge usury and interest, and just all these things. They'll say, well, so that means that, and I've heard people literally make this argument. They'll say, well, so, it's okay that today we don't necessarily follow those laws the same way, because that was just the people of Israel. They could do it to other people, so, there's some wiggle room there. No. If you are a nation that claims that the biblical God is your God, guess what else that means? Every person in this country who lives in this country and calls themselves a United States citizen, you are brethren and kin to one another. If you live in the same country under the same designation of a United States citizen, you are kin. You are brethren to one another. You are fellow citizens to one another. No different than how the people of Israel, a nation, they were kin to one another. They were each other's brethren. Father's Torah for the people of Israel was how the people of that nation, fellow citizens of the same nation, were to treat one another. So if the United States claims, again, on the coinage and on the dollar, in God we trust, you therefore adopt Him as your Elohim, you claim you do, you must therefore follow His law. And therefore, every U.S. citizen who lives in this country, you are brethren to one another. So the Torah, the law of debt forgiveness, not charging interest, that very much applies to you. That applies to every person that lives in this nation. Every single person. Now, for the countries out here in the world that are completely heathen, there is not, and nowhere in their government, nowhere in any institution is there hardly any sign or any scent of Father. There might be some believers, but they're mostly kind of in the fringes of society, kind of like in some of the Oriental nations like North Korea. There's no presence of Father whatsoever in the infrastructure of North Korea. Nowhere. It's understandable, therefore, that they extort and rob from their people and live like heathens. China's the same way. There's no presence of Yah Elohim. Even how Christians talk about Him, there's no presence of Him in the Chinese government, as is the case in a lot of nations in the world. But the United States alone, who loves to parrot the conservative Republican lawmakers and these news anchors and commentators, these conservative news anchors and commentators love to trumpet the Bible, Scripture, that we are a nation that is by God and for God, and that He helped found us as a nation, and Scripture is found in the bedrock of our society. Okay, so condemn yourself with your words then. Put your money where your mouth is. That means you have to live by the law of Elohim. If you adopt Him, you adopt His law. And every person that lives in this nation as a U.S. citizen, you are brethren to one another. And therefore, no different than the people of Israel, you have to administer to one another the same rules of Torah, the same rules of how you deal with one another in terms of commerce, economic commerce and trade, and matters of monetary exchange as the people of Israel were. But do you see this country do that? You know, I'm always saying in these videos, and I don't shy away from it, I'm always saying in these videos how evil and wicked the United States of America is. That the United States of America is the whore of Babylon. This nation allows so much rampant evil, undisguised evil, that the government, the actual laws that comprise this nation, allows and in a lot of ways protects people being able to do what they want to do. The people by the people for the people. Not only does this nation allow so much rampant, detestable filth and evil, whether it's ideologically, concerning gender orientation, infanticide, abortion, allowing pagan worship sites and monuments to be erected to pagan, heathen, religious deities, wherever somebody wants to build a mosque or a Hindi temple. But our very industry, our very economic foundation completely disobeys what Father commanded about giving to the poor and the needy, forgiving and letting debts go, being compassionate, being gracious, being generous. There is not one entity within the United States government that forgives debt. Does the United States government forgive? Is it a law, state, federal, or local, that every 7 years, every debt is to be forgiven? Meaning that every bank has got to be forced to give up and let go of every debt, every loan, no matter what is owed, 7th year of release, all debt's forgiven. Does that happen? Absolutely not. In the country today, debt is continuously rolled over. If you cannot pay your debt, whether to a creditor, to the bank, they will come after you hot and heavy, and they will not stop until they have drained every penny from you. And if you can't pay it, whether it's especially unsecured debt, medical debt, say someone's parents pass away, it happened to my father when his dad passed away. Children inherit their parents' debt. So not only does the debt not get forgiven, not only do creditors and the government, will they doggedly pursue someone until they gain the last penny, but they will roll that debt over onto the children, onto the second generation. If the debt can't be paid, they will sue that person for everything they have until they are living in a refrigerator box on the side of the road. The federal government, the IRS, Internal Revenue Service, they retain the only remaining power today. Creditors can't do it, banks can't do it, but the IRS retains the right to imprison people for not paying their tax debt. And there's no release of tax debt. After 7 years, does the IRS forgive people for at the end of every 7 years letting debt go and forgiving debt? No. It is perpetual. I spoke to a gentleman one time who worked as an attorney, and he said, yeah, you know, if somebody if an entity sues someone for debt, then up to a certain point, they can sue for the debt, and they can just continually just go to a judge and have that debt collection extended year by year by year by year without fail until it's paid back or until they can just take everything that person has to satisfy the debt. There is no law within the United States of America that guarantees a release of debt every 7 years. There is no Yovel, there's definitely no period of time the United States recognizes in any facet where someone loses their home, the bank repossesses their home, they can't pay their mortgage payments and they lose it, and then at a certain period of time, it's surrendered back to them. That definitely doesn't happen. Every level of this nation, every financial level, every institution within this nation charges interest from top down. Interest alone in this nation kills people. More than their payment, more than the loans they take, interest kills people. They rob people in interest. And yet, Father commanded, you shall not charge interest of your brother. And yet, United States citizens, whether it's a bank or it's a credit union, they are still living on a United States soil. So they are brethren to the ones that they are charging interest of. United States citizens charging other United States citizens intense interest. Banks do it. Creditors do it. You get any kind of a loan, you'll get interest. And it was commanded that you were to not charge your brother in interest. Now, the point could be made, okay, well, maybe the United States would be allowed to charge interest and not release debts to people from other countries. Okay, all right, fair. Unless, of course, let's say the United States took over and annexed Canada. Would never happen, but then okay, now they're under the same banner. So now you just have to pick on the South American countries. I'm giving crazy examples, but biblically speaking, scripturally speaking, it is an absolute abomination what the United States of America allows institutionally, economically. There is no debt release. There's no release of property. There is definitely no prohibition or law that prohibits the charging of interest. And it's not just the United States of America, but people of independent wealth, rich people, are so greedy today. They are so obsessed with the demon of want, avarice. You have men like Bill Gates, multi-billionaire, Elon Musk, multi-billionaire. That man alone has got more than enough money. He could go out, he could find people to give to all day long, and he would never come even close to losing his fortune. Now, if you go out and you give to somebody in need, and they take that money and they don't do right by it, that's not your problem. You've given. You did your job. And again, I'm not saying you got here and you do your giving by giving to panhandlers, people who can do for themselves. Now, yeah, there are true beggars. Like when you think about beggars in the biblical context, because when you hear about like in the biblical narrative, beggars, the poor, people who are begging for money, you have to get yourself completely out of the modern context of the kind of beggars you see out here today. The kind of beggars, biblically and anciently speaking, were people that were literally, truly down on their luck. They either had lost their home, their property, no one would hire them, they had no trade, no skill. Maybe they were eaten up with a disease like leprosy, or they were lame. If you were lame, if you had a problem with you, a physical ailment, there was really no help for a lot of the diseases back then. So if you were rendered infirm, you couldn't work. You couldn't no livestock, couldn't till your field, couldn't work a trade. You were poor. Back then, most people who were poor and sat begging on the street corners in ancient cities and towns, they truly were poor. They truly, honestly, did not have much. It's not like today. The vast majority of people you see who are beggars, they are totally well. They are well enough to stand out in the blazing heat and in the freezing cold. And I don't know how many times I've seen panhandlers. They've got phones and they've got all kinds of modern amenities. You see them going into Starbucks, sitting down eating, and they've got all kinds of things, modern amenities like you or I, that you go back, biblically speaking, someone who was poor literally had nothing. They barely even had clothes to wear. You could tell by the look of them they were practically starving to death. Now, there are some people that beg today that are genuine. I have seen, and my heart has been moved to before, give to these people. There are some people that you can tell they are truly infirmed and they have really fallen on hard times. I've seen people who are legless, men who on it that look like old grizzled war vets, Vietnam vets. I've seen guys sitting around with literally no legs. They look rough. They look hard. And you're like, okay, you know what? Yeah, I can see why they're on hard times. Yeah, I'm going to give to them. You have a lot of means and a lot of money. How you give, or where you live. Let's say 100-mile radius of where you live, I guarantee you're going to find more people than you know what to shake a stick at who are genuinely in need. And not bums and losers. People that are trying. People that are trying to change their situation. People who are trying to make it in this crazy, oppressive, incredibly overpriced, unfathomably expensive world we live in right now, who are just trying to make it and are struggling. And there are so many wealthy people out here. It's got more money than they know what to do with. I met a man one time. He told me, he said, hey, I've got more money than I'll ever need. And he had an opportunity to give to people who needed it. For a need he actually saw, and he did nothing about it. Because he's greedy, like so many other people. I have met, so far, every person of wealth and means I have met. They're greedy, they're cold-hearted, they won't give. I've been out to dinner with those people, and I've seen them when they're done, they won't hardly even tip their server. And they've got enough money, they could have tipped that server $1,000. And for them, it would have been like a spit in the bucket. And they won't hardly even give them $10. It is sickening. The wealthy of this world, who are subsequently, most of them, the powerful in the world today, the 1%ers, a lot of people that maybe they're not billionaires, but they're millionaires, they're really well-to-do. They got nice, big, lavish homes, thousands upon thousands of square feet, cars after cars. They have so much stuff that they honestly kind of forget sometimes how much they have. It is sick. It is a filthy, abominable, damnable sickness. They were not given much, so they could gain enormous, vast greed and materialistic avarice and overabundance for themselves that they could not contain. They were given what they were given as an enrichment, so they and their family would not have to struggle, but so they could do good and do for others. And there are some people out there that are struggling, but they're hard workers, that if someone of means were to come along and just give that person a financial libation, that one reset, that they could change that entire family's life. They could turn themselves around, and then they could start getting better off. But the wealthy of this world, they don't care about it. I have met so many people, so many wealthy people who say things like, oh yeah, I didn't have much, I remember I was poor when I was younger. Yeah, I came from hard times. But I never forgot where I came from. I've heard wealthy people say that. And like a lot of wealthy people do, they like to talk. They like to say pretty vain words to make themselves seem like they're something special, something they're not. But in their actions, they are proven hypocrites and liars, because when they have the opportunity to truly give to those in need, they don't do it. No different than the government. This evil, wicked, satanic government, this wicked country, completely spits on the laws of Yah Elohim. They don't forgive debt, don't release homes that were seized. They don't fairly trade and give to their people, give to their brethren. They bleed people dry with interest. Yeah, I guess that this country really is a country for God, because according to, as we talked about, one of the potential linguistic entomological sources of the word God, leading back to the Babylonian deity God, a deity of wealth and fortune. Well, yeah, I guess, this country being so greedy and so stricken with avarice, yeah, it really is a country for God. Definitely not Yah Elohim, though. Because Yah Elohim is about compassion, generosity, giving, opening your hand wide, helping to share with others of what you have been given. Why is it so incredibly important to give? Why is it so incredibly important that Father recorded that the Shemitah year, the Shabbat year, and the Yovel, the Jubilee? Why were those such important years? Because it embodies and encapsulates the heart of what Father commanded us, which is to give freely, without thought, without consideration. Just give. Because he gives to us freely. It is his command. It is not a suggestion. It is a command. And I speak to you now. If you have been given wealth and you have been given means and plenty, and if you do not give, and you are full of greed, and you take what has been given to you and use it only to better yourself and to give yourself more and more and to accumulate so much that you don't even know what you have anymore, and you refuse to give to the needy and to the poor, you refuse to open your hand wide and to share what you have been given, I declare to you now, Yah Elohim, who, make no mistake, gave you what you have. He made it possible for you to have what you have. You will lose it. In this day, here and now, should you not be giving and should you not share and give freely to those that you see that you can do good for, that you can take the plenty you've been given and to share to others in that abundance, then I speak and I proclaim a curse over you now, that everything that you have, everything you've been given, that it will become as rotted fruit, and it would fall away, and that your tree of abundance will be cut down, and you be left with nothing, and in rags, and that you be left in destitution, and there be none to show you the generosity that you refused others. And that is a curse spoken to you directly. You who's been entrusted with much. Because as to the power of this nation, Yahweh Elohim has already declared in his power and in his word, in his mighty declaration, that the days of this nation are numbered, and that he will bring judgment upon it, and that he will bring this country into ruin because of the evil of this tyrannical regime, of this government that does not live by his law. Yah Elohim has already declared himself that he will bring judgment upon the wicked and the evil, and that the days of this nation are numbered, and that he will act in his justice. He, from on high, no man, no army, no person, but Yah Elohim himself, Almighty Father, will bring justice and recompense upon this nation. So their days, the days of this wicked, evil Babylon, are already numbered. But as for you, if you do not share with what you have been given, if you do not make a responsible steward for all you've been entrusted with your plenty, I say to you now, you will lose it. And Yah Elohim will bring you into the dust. And where you once had a sweet taste of plenty, you will only eat of the filth and the ash of poverty and want. So it is.